should end soon. I would like to keep her on a little longer, to be honest. So I want to help with the change management component because what we're doing is a very complex exercise to manage the change in the ministry.
Yes.
We had a communication, not a PR person help us out on a short-term contract, but part of the ministry's portfolio, the new SEA, I think, I've said to the ministry, we've been very terrible at telling our story. Very terrible. Very, very terrible in terms of crafting and relaying that information to the public. And who's this? And he had with him 2 junior officers, very junior in terms of what we've been paying. And the last person would have been around the policy unit. But they're not consultants in the sense, these are on contracts brought in to do a project, most of them. I have no major consultancies, really.
All right. That's very, very detailed. So detailed that we lost count. I did ask how many. So please give us the number so that we can clear you for takeoff.
Honourable Member, in terms of consultancies, I would say in pure consultancies in the true sense, we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have persons, about 4 other persons on short-term contract.
That's how many, sorry?
4.
4, okay.
And then about 4 persons on a short-term contract.
Yes, yes, that's a very small number compared to other places. And you don't find that, I know the answer, but this is for the public, this is not for me. You don't find that this presence of consultants undermines morale in any way within the ministry, do you?
Pardon me? Sorry, I was the chief welfare, the chief child care officer was telling me something. Do I think that the ministry is...
All right.
No, repeat the question, Honourable Member.
Yes, please. No, I was asking if you find that the presence of consultants, well, you can't answer for across the government. Let's restrict it to your ministry.
You mean the small amount of consultants that you just admitted are in the ministry? Go ahead.
Compared to your brothers and sisters.
I don't know.
They have
my
a
brothers
lot.
and sisters. I don't know.
Clear yourself, though. I'm giving you the chance to clear yourself. And there are few, and the world will now hear that your ministry has very few consultants compared with other ministries, but you don't worry about them. We're going to get to them and deal with them. The public will find out who they are and how many they are. You, Honourable Member for St. Michael South, you have only 4, and you are happy to boast about that. And if I were you, I would boast too. But I want to know if the presence of those consultants in the government and certainly within your ministry undermines the morale of the established public servants in any way. That's an opinion that you can offer with your background, academic and political experience now. You can say whether, you can give a judgment as to whether the presence of consultants in your ministry is undermining the morale of the established public servants. That's a very easy question.
I will answer this question. That the staff that I have supporting me here, the heads of most of the major organizations are here. And that they gain their motivation from the fact that they come to work and that they all have the same vision that I have. We have a similar vision to improve the lives of persons in this country.
Yes.
They're all motivated because in the last few years since this government returned to office, they have seen an improvement in the conditions, many of them that they had to work under. They have had a lot more consultation than they had before. Many have actually had the opportunity to travel and to see what other countries are doing and to make presentations in other places as well. I think the staff know, and they're here. You could ask them if you want.
No, I don't talk to them directly. They're here.
I'm just saying that the staff is here, and I'm pretty sure that the staff behind me is motivated, very, very motivated, and continue to be motivated. And that motivation comes from the fact, both intrinsic and extrinsic, in relation to the work that they're doing in the ministry. The other things that you are dealing with and the associations about whether it's consultancy related or not, you're asking me to go now and to involve myself in conjecture.
Yes.
That's your playground.
Yes.
I choose not to play there.
Okay. Let us not conjecture then, Minister. And the final question, sir.
I don't mind.
You're hearing me?
Yes, yeah, the final question.
Yes, yes. Let us hear each other. Let us ignore the commotion. You know how it is around here. Bad manners and so on. Now, so that this question, you may regard this question as an unfair question. And if you regard it as an unfair question, you will say that you decline to answer. And I would ask you if the large number of consultants across your government, a part of which you bear collective responsibility. I see you pulling your microphone, sir.
Honourable Member, that is not part.
I haven't finished the question, though.
It is not part of the estimates debate under this head.
Oh, I see. So the question troubled. The question is troubling.
You pause the question and you ask a relevant question. Thank you.
What's your ruling, sir?
That if you don't have another question, let me move on, because that is not a question for this.
Right, because the Honourable
under
Minister...
this head, that is not his responsibility.
Yes, yes. The Honourable Minister has cleared himself in terms of his consultants. And what your ruling is that you will not entertain questions about consultants. Large numbers of consultants across the public service. We will not entertain that question.
Honourable Member.
I accept your ruling,
well, if you
and
accept
sir,
my,
I will move on.
My ruling, move on.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's it. That's it, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Minister, I'll go directly to Program 423, Subprogram 594, Social Empowerment Agency, which relates to the amalgamation of social services, which, as you've pointed out, Minister, has been attempted, has been initiated, has been danced around by previous governments, and you and your team are the ones who are managing to get us closer to fulfillment. And that is no mean feat. It must be acknowledged. I want to ask, though, about social workers and make reference to the fact that in my own ministry, with respect to technology, we've taken the decision of having a common government digital service, that those who work in technology across government will feel and will belong to a group of professionals in the public service who, and therein be offered training, be offered the opportunity to work in different places. Similarly, for accountants in government, for economists in government, as well as for attorneys in government, that we go about the business of professionalizing and unifying, standardizing the profession so that people have colleagues with whom they can relate, so that people understand that there's training available, that there's support available for the work that they do. I wanted to ask you, in this amalgamation, first of all, is there some effort to bring social workers? I imagine that there may be some who fulfill this role outside of your ministry, who may act as outreach or extension officers or visit homes and engage with people that may not currently sit in the Ministry of People Empowerment, but that potentially you want to bring under that rubric so that you're able to standardize the level of training, the level of support that they receive, so that you can then also start to amalgamate the data that they're collecting such that that information allows the rest of government to improve our services to the public. Your ministry is one that is at the core of interacting with people, understanding what their deprivations are and what opportunities might be available to them. So is there some effort as part of this social empowerment agency to bring all social workers in government together to standardize and unify what they do, and in so doing, to improve the common collection of data, the common platform of evidence that we use to strengthen service delivery across government?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. The Social Empowerment Agency in its original, well, in its immediate iteration and manifestation is really the 4 agencies that would have fallen under the ministry, welfare, childcare, NAB, and NDU. But I take the point that there needs to be a bigger conversation in relation to standardizing social work interventions, whether it is the collection of data or whether it is the way they interact with persons or whether it is the way they offer a solution to the problems that are presented. We have done a lot of work with the Barbados Social Work Association. I think they too have a similar position as the one you articulated in your question in relation to standardizing social services across Barbados. We may not do it through the ministry, but I do think that it needs to be done. I had a concern at some point about I probably shouldn't say concern, but I had a reason to want to know particularly what is coming out of the university in relation to the training for persons who do the social work program. Because my view is that a person who leaves university should be equipped with the skills, especially those who have to do the practicum, where they're assigned to work in certain agencies, to be prepared to work in conditions that social workers are required to work in. And I think we have to get to the point where we work with the university in terms of the training program initially, so that we up the level of skill, so that by the time a person comes, a person is already trained up enough to offer a fairly decent level of intervention. I think we have to work with the Social Workers Association. I do know that they have set in place efforts to standardize the service, which is what I think you're asking, and we need to be able to follow up on that. And I think the ministry should probably take a more leading role in that regard. So yes, Honourable Member, I think we should also perhaps just look at how we can work toward having a standard. And I think the standardization of service is something that should happen across the board, really, for social workers, for nurses, for doctors, for police, for any professional field, just to have a standard that we know when people fall beneath that standard. And I think the last thing I would say in relation to that is, I had a pastor who used to say, what gets measured gets done. He used to say all the time. And we have, therefore, to be able to find a way to just measure, the quality of our intervention. And then he would also say, people don't do what you expect, people do what you inspect. And I think we have to have a system of monitoring as well, so that we know when people actually fall beneath the standard. So the point is taken, but efforts are already being made. For certain, within the Social Empowerment Agency, there's going to be a standardization of service, a standardization of training. But I understand that it could be bigger to involve all social workers.
There was a, thank you, Minister. There was a second part of that you may remember later, but I have a follow-up question. Now, in my earlier question, I had asked about the data that you're collecting and the extent to which it has the capacity to strengthen service delivery across government, because I believe that your ministry gleans information about how people are living that we don't all get to see. A part of that I imagine you get to understand has to do with any gender disparities in care and well-being. Now, Minister, you have a standing program, 632, on gender affairs, and the relevant sub-program relates to the Bureau of Gender Affairs. Now, the allocation for the financial year 25-26 is, including statutory, just under 1.3 million, if what I'm seeing is correct. Now, I don't need to tell you that addressing gender equality through a budgetary allocation is a complex thing, because this 1.3 million definitely cannot address issues of gender equality across the society. But I know that in your ministry and in your programs, you are doing quite a bit of work in that regard, in particular as it relates to care and how you support women and families who have to provide care. So can you tell us a bit about how, notwithstanding the small allocation with respect to gender affairs, how are you addressing gender equality across the programs of the ministry?
Yeah, two things. Firstly, in relation to data generally and what we come into contact with, there's a lot of administrative data across the public service. And the tragedy, I think, again, of the Barbadian public service is that we do not see the value oftentimes in administrative data in every single ministry, mine, yours, every ministry. There is a lot of information that is collected, some of it meant to answer one question, but gives information on something else. We may know what people choose to eat. We know what people chose to eat during COVID. We know what people choose to eat now. We know how people change behaviors. It is a rich amount of administrative data that oftentimes is not used to make decisions. And I just think the government in general has to get better at using data. It has to get better at using administrative data. I'm sure we'd also agree, Honourable Member, that the Bureau of Gender Affairs, while it is the Bureau responsible for ensuring that we reach gender parity to a certain extent, that the budget would never be able to reflect that, and that the work that has to be done in gender has to be done across various ministries. It has to be that we seek to have gender or less gender inequality across the board. We had the opportunity recently to review pieces of legislation in Barbados. Some of them are so, when you read them, you cannot believe that they were written by people who were right thinking, but because the times have changed. So some of the things we're going to have to do is review the legislation, but I've asked before, and that perhaps we should resend it, just for everybody to review their own legislation, all the heads, in relation to a lot of this old legislation from the 1920s and 30s and stuff, to be able to look at some of the things that are written into our legislation. And then there's some things written into our policies. I mean, even now when you go to register a child and the things associated with that. So things that have become either by law or just by practice that do not favor a level of gender parity. And those things that we also have to be able to reflect. And the truth is, I think every ministry needs to look at all of its policies, whether those policies allow us to reach where we want to reach in relation to parity between the genders, in as much as that is the aspiration. Then lastly, we were working on our gender policy, and the director of the gender unit is here, and I would ask him to speak. We've been working on our gender policy, which kind of gives us I wouldn't say a blueprint, but a series of signposts in relation to the direction that we want the country to go in. And part of the conversations we're going to be having now are consultations around that gender policy with various ministries, various businesses, in terms of looking at the policy and what we think, where we think Barbados should be headed. Is your ministry allowing us to go there? There used to be a time when ministries would report their HIV information. Every ministry had an HIV budget. And over time, those budgets have been reduced. Some ministries don't even have one. But that level of reporting is what we need in gender too. For every ministry to be able to report in relation to gender, using a gender lens, using a gender framework, to be able to report on that. But the budget that you see here, I don't think is even remotely related to the work that is before the gender unit. And more importantly, I don't even think it is related to the work that is before the country. Our history is shrouded in gender inequality. And you know, this conversation oftentimes makes people uncomfortable. Let me tell you, I'll pass over now. Once I was in the newspaper. I was at the university, the School for Gender Studies. So behind me was a sign. I was in the newspaper in the front, and I was making a statement in relation to something completely unrelated to gender. But the paper carried me in front of a gender studies sign. And somebody sent me a message at the ministry to be careful, like basically threatening my life. about the work of the ministry and what it is you're doing in relation to gender. So people want to hijack the word gender to mean things that gender, in its pure sense, does not mean. And so I think we have to have a bold and brave conversation around gender issues. What is gender? What does gender mean? What are we trying to address? Like basic things, we have to really, as the PM keeps saying, we really have to go back to basics, and that there are basic conversations to be had. But I would ask the director of the gender unit to speak on this matter, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. William Warner, Director of Bureau of Gender Affairs. And as the Minister alluded to, gender has been one of the areas where we are challenged, and really challenged by lack of sex disaggregated data. The work of the Bureau, as you might well be aware, and Minister alluded to it is a cross-cutting issue. So it is not just work which the Bureau has to undertake, but also the other ministries and departments. And when we really intend to work in terms of getting that support, we are going to bring a paper to Cabinet. That paper is going to seek Cabinet's approval for gender, or more or less be rolled out across all the ministries and departments. Having done that, that would allow us to go then to the next step, and that is to create focal points in all the ministries and departments of government. So that is the strategy. We still believe that the strategy to achieve gender equality in Barbados is through the strategy of gender mainstreaming. The Honourable Minister referred to a question on how do we get the work done. The Bureau right now, we prioritize certain areas, and a lot of the work we do, we try to work as collaboratively as we can with other departments, with the NGOs in the space, so that where we have that shortfall in technical capacity and skills that we can make up through the use of our partners. In terms of the advancement in gender equality and gender mainstreaming, let me say that we are at a stage now where we are seeing incremental strides in gender mainstreaming in Barbados. For example, if you look at the Ministry of Labour, they have just actually adopted the Convention on Violence in the Workplace. The work of the Ministry of Environment, they're also giving gender considerations to their policies and their programs. The Barbados Water Authority, through their 3Rs project, they are also including gender considerations in that project. And the Bureau has been able to sit on these committees and offer input into these projects. So yes, we appreciate that the monies allocated to gender may not be that amount that can really do the gender work that is possible. But at the Bureau, we try to, as I say, prioritize our areas for work. And having done that, and through doing that, we're able to submit some accomplishments in gender. Thank you.
Honourable Member, I also want to add in relation to your question, the ministry finds itself as a ministry predominantly responsible for care work. And the unfortunate reality is that, shouldn't say unfortunate reality, but the reality is that care work normally falls in this country to women. If we look at the social work program at the university, it is predominantly women. And it is reflected too in the number of social workers who are mostly women. In fact, the staff of the ministry, for the most part, is women. The staff at the child care board and the children's homes and the day nurseries, all women. So that the persons who are offering care work, the care responsibility, the burden falls on women. I think we have to find a way to value that work a little bit better, though. I think care work should be valued and treated as very important work, and that the salaries that sometimes we pay persons involved in the care sector, they're just too low. And we need to offer better salaries to persons in the care sector. I think also we have to find a way to value and to report on non-paid work. so that it is still work where a woman has to stay home and take care of the children. It is still work where she has to take care of the sick persons. It is still work where she has to take care of the elderly in the household. That burden often falls to females, but yet it is work, and we have to find a way to value it. In relation, that's what we give. In relation to what we are receiving, in the in the welfare model that we have, of the 5,000 plus who receive support, easily 90% of those are women. So that, again, women are the ones coming forward for support to support their children and so on. In the One Family program, about 80% to 85% of the households are headed by women, easily about 75% of the persons we deal with there in terms of the care that the persons who are really seeking the care. When I go to the training programs, and I often show up, I am sometimes shocked when I see a single man or two men show up for the care and the training. Again, women are stepping forward for that kind of intervention as well. And we're seeing that all over the ministry. The reality is that most of our programs attend to women. And it is not that they're framed in such a way as to only be for women. It is that for the most part, women do the care work. For the most part, it is still women who are coming forward for a child for support. For the most part, in our ministry, it's still women who are coming forward for the training, who are trying to improve their circumstances. So we know that there is an unequal reality facing women, and the ministry is working to be able to fill that gap, because we're offering a lot of these programs to women. And truthfully, a lot of our services are also offered by women.
Thank you, Minister. I think the fact that you are also investing in care in households, so that your elder care program and other programs that help relieve some of that care burden for women, to allow them to participate in the formal labor market and to allow them to make other social and economic choices, is also gender equality in action. And I think that your ministry has been able to demonstrate that. Finally, related to this question of care and outreach to the communities, is a program that you just mentioned under your poverty alleviation program, the One Family program. Now, there are those who might say, not necessarily me, that we have seen the One Family program before. Years back, there was something called the IC Bridge. You all know this very well. That was modeled on the Chilean model, and it was about multiple interventions for the family to cover things like health and employment, and social support, and food, and all of these things. And following on from that was actually a program which is still reflected in your estimates, even though there's no appropriation in this current financial year. The last estimates were approved for the last financial year, I believe. Strengthening Human and Social Development, a project that was also modeled on the IC Bridge program, in the sense that it was several interventions at once for individuals and families. So now we have the One Family program. And the One Family program seeks to identify a number of families across Barbados who could most benefit from these multiple interventions in a range of areas, because we all know that poverty is not just about income. It is about multiple deprivations, and your country assessment of living conditions, if that's still the name, is measuring some of those things. But what is the difference? What is the One Family program for Barbadians that IC Bridge was not, that Strengthening Human and Social Development was not? What can we expect to be more impactful and to be more lasting and sustainable?
Honourable Member, the head of the One Family will speak specifically to some of this, but the IC Bridge model, the IC Bridge was IC stands for identification, the S is stabilization, the first E is enablement, and the last E was empowerment. That was the IC bridge model. That's what the IC meant. And the one family, and as you said before, that a lot of that came from the work we would have done on the Chilean Puente model in 2005, 2006, 2007, which formed the IC bridge, which is now evolved into this program. And I think the pillars that we're using are pretty much the same pillars. What we've done is that we've expanded the reach of the program. What we've done is that we've invited other people to participate in the program. I think the evaluation, and I would ask the head of the unit to speak to that. When we evaluated the IC bridge model, at the end of the day, there were a few things that we felt we needed to adapt, and I think we've made those adaptations in the one family to be able to offer more support for persons. Like, for example, I know people wanted access to more counseling, and that we're offering that. In the last conversation we had, there's certainly a number of persons who would like housing or housing matters addressed, and the Prime Minister, myself, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, we would have spoken about the UDC, the Urban Development Commission, now soon to be the UDC, RDC, the RUDC, prioritizing those persons so that they have access to housing. And in fact, putting them at the top of the list so that persons who get access to housing from UDC and RDC are done so on the basis of priority, and that the vast majority of those should be coming from the One Family program, so that would allow them access to housing. We would have also prioritized in terms of training, and we've had conversations about putting persons on the One Family ahead of other persons, because in terms of when you've done the assessment, you must recall that the One Family is actually the 1,000 most vulnerable families. There's little argument that these persons need that level of support. And so we're making sure that they get access to the training. And then the last one I would refer to would be in relation to healthcare as well. So that when health is an issue, to make sure that we can prioritize healthcare as well. So I think just being able to say that you're getting benefits is one thing, but prioritizing our persons so that they feel the difference is another thing. We would have also done, in terms of the welfare support, because we do not offer support from two pots of funds. Most of the support traditionally came from welfare. And again, the welfare department would prioritize those cases. So people were able to get a faster, more cohesive response from the government, not necessarily the ministry, but from the government, to allow them to be able to say that being in this program has brought them some benefit. But I'll let Ms. Danielle speak if she feels the need to any other matter as well.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, the One Family program is modeled off of the IC Bridge. So for the first IC Bridge program, we would have had a pilot of at least 30 persons or 30 households. The Strengthening Human and Social Development program, which would have been funded by the IDB, we would have had 250 families under that program. We're only focused on 4 of the 7 pillars. Now, the 7 pillars that we are included in the One Family program would include personal identification, education and human resource development, health promotion, family dynamics, housing, employment, income, and social benefits. So those 7 pillars we are actually focusing on under the One Family program, and the minister would have indicated it is going to be more expansive. We would have learned from many lessons from the previous programs where we would have undertaken that same IC Bridge model, and what we recognize is the need really for prioritization. We need to prioritize the clients, make sure that the behavioral change is managed in order to make an impact in terms of the success of the program. So through the model and through the IC Bridge model, I should say, the One Family is catering still to those needs, but making the families a priority. And as I said, expanding the number of families who need assistance throughout Barbados.
Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Minister and team.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A number of the questions I wanted to ask have already been asked, so I will not repeat them. One of the things I've noticed, Minister, is that much of the conversation has been around those people with heart who serve, who are being paid for service. And we know that an important part of what will help us get through the increasingly aging population that we have, as well as the challenges we are having with regards to child rearing, that we need the support of those people for whom care is a labor of love, and that's all. And so my question is about what kind of public education that speaks to awareness, that speaks to building the knowledge, as well as the skills for child care, as well as elder care. How going forward in this new year are you augmenting that type of education that covers the awareness, the skills, and the knowledge?
Thanks for the question, Honourable Member. The Director of the Child Care Board will start, and then the Head of the National Assistance Board, and then the Permanent Secretary.
Roseanne Richards, Director of the Child Care Board. With respect to the question pertaining to child care, the Child Care Board, in collaboration with Paradise, as well as the Optimist Club, we've been doing some parenting programs, but truth be told, I think that the parenting programs, there are lots of different parenting programs across Barbados, but I believe that we should do a more targeted approach because from experience, when I go to some of those sessions, we have parents of infants, preschoolers, primary school students, as well as adolescents. And I believe that if we want to be able to give parents more, we could do targeted parenting programs where we do parenting to age-specific children so that the preschoolers, the parents for those would be at those sessions. The primary school students, those parents would be attending those parenting sessions, as well as the adolescents. I also think that it would be useful to have a session where both parents and their children could be in attendance at some of the sessions. I think that would go a long way in helping advance the cause for parenting. However, I know that with our new child protection legislation, we will be doing some public sensitization workshops, and in collaboration with UNICEF, we hope to get those started very soon in the new financial year. Yes, I suppose that.
Maybe in relation to some of the work that we're doing there as well.
Good afternoon again. One of our strategic objectives at the National Assistance Board is to enhance staff development and performance through continuous training. And we have commenced that training. We have had 120 of our workers were trained in CPR, and that was facilitated by the Red Cross.
Officer, before you move on, I didn't get your name. I didn't hear the name. You said it, but you didn't hear it clearly.
Teresa Hamilton.
Thank you.
Yes, and as I was saying, 120 of our workers were trained in CPR. That was facilitated by the Red Cross and through funding from a philanthropic entity. We also trained 620 of our workers in values and ethical behaviors in social service organization, and that was facilitated by NTI. 70 of our workers received training in dementia care. We have also had training in collaboration with the Barbados Alzheimer's Association, on elder abuse, and that was done for both formal and informal caregivers. Also, again, in collaboration with the Barbados Alzheimer's Association and the District Emergency Organization, the NAB coordinated a community walkthrough. And in that walkthrough, we identified vulnerable older persons, and we spoke on disaster preparedness, the elder abuse, Alzheimer's, where we disseminated information on the awareness throughout the community. And there are plans in place for continuous training. And the National Assistance Board, that is one of our mantras: training, 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 education, education, education. Thank you.
J. Wiltshire, Permanent Secretary. Mr. Chairman, thanks for that question, Minister. The ministry is going to be embarking on an intensive PR program in the next financial year. As you would know, the Child Protection Act was passed with Parliament. Also, the Chief Parliamentary Council is currently in the process of preparing legislation in relation to the rights of older persons. So we are going to be embarking on an intensive PR program with a view to informing the public of the provisions of those very critical pieces of legislation. We also recognize that we have to inform the public, particularly in relation to the care of elderly persons, and indeed, Ms. Cynthia Ford, as well as Dr. Jacqueline Wiltshire, have, in association and in collaboration with the Polytechnic, as well as the Barbados Community College, have established or seeking to create a course whereby they will actually train persons in the community in how to care for older persons, because we do recognize that there are a number of persons in the communities who do not have the necessary expertise, the necessary training to care for their family members, and we feel that it's really incumbent upon the ministry to provide some degree of training to those persons in the community with a view to enhancing the care of elderly persons. So there is going to be significant work that we'll be doing in the next financial year in terms of these two critical pieces of legislation, and in terms of providing some element of training to persons and communities in relation to the caring for elder persons.
Thank you, team. I am happy to hear that that training is coming to communities for families, and not only the workers who are being paid by the government, but also for just family members who care to learn, to be able to be a part of this ecosystem of care. My second question relates to the social workers. Minister, I've heard you say over and over you can't have enough people to help people. And in this case, my understanding is that going into this next financial year, you're seeking to expand the number of social workers. Now, as you know, the Ministry of Education also have social workers, and there are never enough social workers to do the social work. And I also heard your PS speak earlier about working with agencies that do that same work, particularly the work of social care. My question is, I know we've had previous conversations about how we will be able, not to consolidate the resources necessarily for social work, but how to share those resources to make sure that we have enough coverage across not only the areas that your ministry speaks to specifically, but also to include our schools to boost our capacity and our resources in that area.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I know this is a topic that has had the attention of the Director of the Child Care Board, and I will let her speak, and then I will add a few thoughts.
Roseanne Richards, Director of the Child Care Board. So the social workers or the child care officers at the Child Care Board, we work collaboratively with the social workers within your ministry. as it relates to investigation of matters pertaining to children in schools. We work with the social workers within the primary schools. We also, on occasion, would have to do joint home visits if there's a need for that. And we also have case conferences from time to time as the need arises based on the particular case. So I could think of one instance, if I was to use that example. We had a situation with a school in the north, and there was a lot of collaboration between our workers and your workers as it relates to the investigation of that matter. There's another case that I can think of that is actually happening at this moment with a school in St. James. And again, we are working together. We've gone to the school, we've worked with a very collaboration with the social worker at the primary school to bring a resolution to that matter, as well as to refer that child for further assessments within another ministry. So while there is collaboration, I think that it could be enhanced, and we're working to make sure that the best interests of every child in Barbados is served by enhanced collaboration.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The truth is that, when we speak of children in education or children in care or children in community groups or children anywhere, we're talking about essentially the same children. These are the same children, and we may do that for the purposes of debate or for the purposes of how we run ministries, but it's the same set of children. And I think we all have at the core an interest in making sure that children get the best care, best treatment. We have, as you know, we've just started the Social Empowerment Agency, which will be our overarching agency for dealing with some of these issues. We've also had many reasons to have conversations over the last year, your ministry and mine. And I do know that we need to set clearer protocols, especially given the child protection legislation which we passed, in relation to how child abuse is reported and what is supposed to happen once it's reported. In fact, you would recall that the legislation makes it mandatory for teachers to report child abuse. And therefore, I think we also have to be able to offer teachers the level of support. And I don't think it's a case only after something has happened. I think the training that has to be done now, so that teachers know what to do in relation to how to respond, so that our social workers are available to the Ministry of Education, because as I said, it's the same children. And therefore, that training has to begin with earnest. In fact, I know the director was working on some protocols that we need to finalize. The other thing is that we would have started the work in the ministry on a secure treatment facility. That specifically is for children who would have been abused or have reason to come into contact with the ministry if they've been sent there by the court. And that's a small facility meant to deal with children who would have had some issue that has caused them to be in need of care. Remember the legislation that currently exists, well, it no longer exists, that spoke to wandering, where a child could basically leave home, will find themselves in the justice system, when that child could have been running from something, and teachers come into contact with a lot of that information. So we have that facility where you would be able to send some of those children there once they've been assessed. But we've also had conversation about a larger facility. The need to have a larger facility for children who are exhibiting deviant behavior, so that we could treat them there too, in cases, whether it's a case of abuse or primarily a case of discipline. So I think we really have to work closer together. I thank you for the relationship we already have, but I know we have to work closer together over the next few years. The social workers in the Ministry of People Empowerment would tell you, they're all behind me, so I'm watching my words, but they would tell you that they're already stretched, many of them, that the pressure is being brought to bear on them is so much that perhaps they can't do that. But I think we have to have a few of them that we just isolate, particularly the ones who would have been working with children, to be available to the Ministry of Education, to be able to offer the level of support that the Ministry of Education is going to need. Considering as well the transformations that you're bringing to that ministry and the way we're going to be doing business. So I agree with you entirely.
I just want to thank the ministry for the collaboration that has been ongoing and is strengthening. And I'm glad to see that additional resources are being put in place to ensure that that collaboration grows and becomes even more meaningful. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until tomorrow, the 19th of February at 11 a.m.
The question is that this Honourable Chairman will be suspended until the 19th day of February at 11 a.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against? Huh? Say the 11th. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chairman stands suspended until the 19th day of February 2025 at 11 a.m.